So we're live. Welcome back to the Magicminds podcast. I'm Matt Burke. On the show today, I'm joined by a special guest, Dave. What's the crack?
How are we doing? Good to be here.
Good to have you on the show. Guys, I'm absolutely delighted to have Dave on the show. I've done a bit of work with Dave in the job that I do at the NRH. Dave is part of a company called Diversity.ie, Open Minds. Yes, sir?
Yes, sir. Open Minds.
Open Minds. Open Minds meets Magicminds.
Magicminds, yeah, or I like to think it's reimagining the way we think, yeah. When I started Open Minds first, I don't know where the name came from, but I was always kind of keenly interested in thinking about how we think. And I reckon, the only way that you're ever going to make any kind of successful change was to be open-minded about the challenges that life presents, and that's kind of where the name came from. And had it since.
I love it, absolutely love it, and I love the quote that you have on the website. Diversity is everybody's business.
That came from a friend of mine who unfortunately passed on about 8 or 10 years ago. His name was Phil Walsh. He's no relation, but Phil used to run a communications company, and it was him who kind of, him and Phil and his team had done work helping us to set it up, and they came back with the idea of, that diversity is everybody's business. And, it really was, and it's one of the things I've learned in all the work that I've been doing, that very often when people think about diversity, they think about them, whoever them happen to be. And unconsciously, it's when we think about diversity, we're doing stuff for them. And very, very few people realise that it's about them. It's about, it begins with you. Begins with who you see in the mirror first thing in the morning. And, if it works in there's a much better chance that you'll buy into organisation initiatives. But if your perception is that it's them and there's nothing in it for you, you're kind of going, what's in it for me? Why would I buy into this? And I suppose that, it was one of the biggest learnings that I've had since I started Open Minds, and it was Phil's caption, that idea, if it's everybody's business. As I was in America recently, and somebody said to me, it's a personal issue. Diversity is a personal issue. It's, it begins with the individual, but most people don't see it that way, and a lot of organizations don't see it that way. So it's hypothesized or thought about as if it's, somehow just 9 grounds of discrimination, or, that so long as we're seen to be equal. When it's much, much more than that. And, Phil's original caption is kind of opened the world for me.
Yeah, and that's really poignant for me at the moment when you say that. Look, anything in life, we look outside of ourselves. We don't turn around, we don't turn in. Because 9 times out of 10, that's where the answers lie. With ourselves. Whether we're going to be a change management, whether we're going to be a leader, whether we're going to be participating in a healthy relationship, we need to turn around and look in and say, it's us too.
I'm actually fascinated. It's great that we're having this conversation. I'm actually fascinated at the moment with what's called the 3 principles. I don't know if you've come across it, but they were identified, I suppose, rather than discovered, but identified by a chap named Sydney Banks, and he was a welder, a Scottish welder, and had been going through a bad time, and describes how he was at a program one day, and he had an interaction with somebody, and whatever they had said to him stuck him to the floor, was basically what he said. And he said in that moment he had a realization that no matter what happens to us, it's the 3 principles for him were this idea of mind, this idea of this universal mind, that we're all somehow interconnected, and we are.
Yeah.
The idea then of thought, that it's our thoughts that shape how we see the world, or how we interact with the world. And that he developed this idea of the 3 principles, the idea of thought. But so that whole idea of the 3 principles really resonated with me. I've huge interest in neuroscience. I have a huge interest in, we as people, like you, why do we think the way we think? What makes us think that way? And it's one of the things I spend a lot of time on the diversity programs that we run, is getting people to think, and you were talking earlier on about leadership. I worked with a leader recently, and he said to me, we spent a lot of time, this organization had gone through a lot of change, and he said, we spent a lot of time, creating the change program, creating spreadsheets and Visio sheets and various, approaches to the project, but he said, we didn't give 5 or 10 minutes to thinking about people and the people end of it, and the resistance that when it comes, where does it come from? People. It can't come from the process. The process is nothing.
Sometimes we get lost in the systems and
absolutely.
the process. We forget the people.
We get completely lost in it, and even again, the book I love reading, and I recommend it to any of your readers or to any of your listeners. The fifth discipline. The idea of looking at the fifth discipline is this idea of systems thinking. Peter Senge, and again, listen to his stuff on YouTube. That it's all about it begins with the person, begins with the individual, it begins with our thinking, it begins with our mindset. So I'm fascinated by mindsets in organizations, and this whole idea of when I talk about diversity, as I said, most of the time I was giving the group I was working with this morning. I was just giving an example of a program I had done in Italy last year, and I said to the group, what comes into your head when you think of the word diversity? And the chief executive happened to be there, and he said problems. I said, what do you mean problems? And he said, people, they're problems, aren't they? And it struck me that if that's his mindset or his state coming to work, how is that mindset impacting the space that that is the workplace? And I love
that tears down.
Absolutely, the idea of this waterfall effect, but that for me works, and this has been a long learning process for me. But this idea of that our workplaces really are spaces that we co-create. They're not created by an individual or a board, or they're created by us as individuals, and what it is that we feel we can contribute or we feel safe contributing to the space. There's a fantastic talk on YouTube by a woman called Heidi Schleifer, and in her talk she talks about the idea of the TED Talk, but she references the idea that the space between two parents is the playground of the child.
Wow.
When I heard it, I was fascinated, and I remember thinking, wow, what a statement that if it's a safe space, hopefully the child grows up rich. If it's a toxic space, well, obviously that's going to have its implications too. But I love to think workplaces are no different. Anywhere that we human beings come together, we come together to create a space. We share a space, whether it's a hospital, a police station, it doesn't matter. Wherever we happen to work, we share that space. And, what happens in that space is really down to our involvement, or what it is that we feel safe to put into the space. So really, for me, the job of leadership is to create that safe space.
Yeah, fantastic.
To think at that level that how do I influence the people who work with me, to such an extent that they feel safe contributing in our space, whatever our space happens to be. And that level of thinking, that fifth discipline thinking, that that level of Sydney Banks thinking takes us so far from the idea of diversity being, just about 9 grounds of discrimination, and then to this, it's about everyone. It's about, all of the people who interact in this space, and how we get the best from people, and how we make them feel comfortable to contribute in the space. So for me,
and they own it then. And they own it then.
Absolutely.
It's part of them. When you turn it in.
Yeah.
They own it. They're their feelings. They have autonomy on it, and then they can participate at their level.
They can co-create.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me,
co-create. That's
co-create. I just, in the work that I do, I just say to people, I use that idea of space. It is about space work. It's about thinking about our thinking. How did we get to where we're at right now? It's about the idea of co-creating. That I as an individual can co-create if I feel empowered to do it, if I feel that this is a safe space for me to do it. And it's also about reimagining. I often say to people, diversity really is about how do we reimagine. There's a piece of Gallup research that shows that a manager's commitment to the diversity on his or her team, of their team, is the number one driver of engagement, right? And yet I talk to people, they don't even know what diversity means. That they're still thinking it's about them.
Yeah.
So reimagining what diversity means, reimagining to say this is an organization opportunity, this is a business opportunity, and if it's an opportunity for a business, it's an opportunity for our people and through our people to grow. If that, that if we provide the opportunity through our people, so that they want to contribute, from a neuroscience point of view, we talk about that idea of being in this prefrontal cortex state, this creative state, this good state where I feel that I feel safe, I feel like I want to do it. But too often, my experience is that people can be in this limbic state, this prehistoric state, this fight or flight,
this reptilian brain.
Yeah, that even this idea of talking to people about an annual review. For most people, the idea of an annual review churns them up. And how does that happen? What is it about the way we think and communicate that people could be apprehensive going into something that should be about development, and yet they're going in apprehensive?
Probably the way it's sold, the way it's packaged, their own insecurities, the culture of the organisation, their modus operandi. There's so many.
It's a raft, it's spectrum of influences. And that's why I said this idea of reimagining. If we're to think, as Heidi Schleifer says about the idea of the space, how do we reimagine the space?
I love it.
To make it, a place where people want to be, where people, contribute, where they feel like
Lovely, and that's part of the visualization. If you can see it, feel it, believe it,
Absolutely, and it's also the skills of a leader then.
Yeah.
How do we, skill up our leaders so that they're able to think at that level, that it's not just about the task. The task happens through people. But again, I work in, a lot of organizations where they're so heavily task focused. And yeah, it gets the job done, but is it getting the job done to the extent that the day you need resilience, or the day that you hit a sidewinder, or the day that something goes wrong, are my people able to innovate, to react, to be creative? And that's the day, really, I think that, when we talk about diversity, that's the day we plan for it. The day that we empower people that, when they hit a rough patch, or when things don't go right for them, that they're able to react and to think.
React and adapt.
And to reimagine, that they say, okay, so, it's happened. What do we do? I love that idea of, I went to Auschwitz a couple of years ago, and I had read Viktor Frankl's book. I don't know if you've read it, Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah. I have it in the house. I've read a couple of pages. I keep putting it down, picking it up, and I've not really forced myself.
So it's really when I went to Auschwitz that it hit me. I remember walking into a bookshop, and there it was. There's a robin redbreast on the cover, and it just kind of jumped out in the bookshop. But I suppose Stephen Covey also took it in the 7 Habits. This idea of between stimulus and response is our golden freedom to choose, if we choose to look for that space. And
I love it.
Well, it came from Viktor Frankl. That and his experiences in Auschwitz. That
you find meaning in anything, isn't it?
Absolutely. And he said no matter what people did to him, they could beat him, rape him, starve him, humiliate him. They could do what they wanted. But he said his realization was that how he reacted was completely his choice, and no one could take it away from him. That this was the last great freedom,
wow.
Or one of the greatest freedoms that we as human beings have. And for me, that's so crucial, to teach people that idea of that, between whatever happens to us and how we react is this space. And how do we give people this, the tools to be able to go into that space, to be introspective, to be reflective, to go inside and say, so, okay, how did I get to this level of thinking? What has me thinking the way I'm thinking? And the 3 principles that I mentioned earlier on, the whole idea of them is to get you thinking about the idea of that, it is about our thoughts. It absolutely is. At the end of the day, it's about the way we think. And, if we can think about the way we think and realise that they're just thoughts.
We step out from the waterfall of thoughts and we observe them like we're not engulfed in them. We're not standing in the rain. We can stand back and go, look the way I'm thinking right now. Is this beneficial to me?
And it shouldn't be your identity.
We identify
it shouldn't shape you. That we should. And for me, it's a tragedy that we don't teach this kind of stuff, to our kids at a much younger age. That we help them to become much healthier in the way that they think, and the way they perceive the world. And those are tools that we could give earlier. But that for me, it really is, in the 20 years that I've been doing this work, or since I started Open Minds, it really is that, and for me, it's been a long, slow progression, a long, learning. It was Phil Walsh originally, I told you about him, who kind of recommended that I study NLP, or neuro-linguistic programming.
Yeah.
And he was the one who kind of started me on that journey. And I just became fascinated with, that whole idea of neuroscience, as human beings, how did we get to think the way that we think? You know, so whether it's from a cultural point of view, you know, Ireland is not what it was 20 years ago. You know, it's this melting pot now of people from, you know, all around the world. But we bring this cognitive diversity, we bring this culture, and we see the world in very different ways. It's not wrong. You know, we're not broken. It just is different. And if we're open-minded enough to be able, and flexible enough to be able to say, okay, well, you know, I can try and stand back and see, you know, what's happening through two perspectives. You know, my perspective and the perspective of the person on the other side. But also to realise that when we form judgments, they're coming from within. They're coming from my software. They're coming from the stuff that my parents put in there, and my grandparents put in there, and the school put in there. And so long as I'm able to snap back and say, okay, that's my perspective. That's my reality. It may not be somebody else's reality. And that whole idea, again, one of the presuppositions of NLP is this idea of that the map is not the territory. You know, and I often say to people, think about it. You know, you go to, you're sitting in a doctor's surgery waiting for results. What's the map in your head? What's the thinking? You know, you practically have yourself buried. And then you go in and you discover, well, you know, it's nowhere near what I thought it was going to be. You know, the map is not the territory. You know, and again, you know, that if we can kind of think the maps that I create in my head very often are not the territory when I get there. You know, but the maps are the thing that influence us. And can we learn to rethink the maps and where I got them from?
Wow.
You know, but, you know,
brilliant.
I said it's a way of protecting ourselves too. You know, we're social beings, and, you know, as human beings, we come together to keep ourselves safe. The job of our unconscious is to keep us safe.
Keep us safe, yes.
So what are we doing? You know, we're constantly trying to keep safe. But, you know, I would say to people, is there a better way to keep safe? Can you do this in a different way? And that's the idea of reimagining, you know. So if we can get people to just think about their thinking. And for me, it took diversity and inclusion to a whole new level.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back a little bit.
Yeah.
So what's your history? What brought you to that? What's your background?
What got me to this? When I was...
Junior formal life.
When I was a kid, all I ever wanted, you know, in school they used to say, you know, career guidance, teacher, what do you want to do? All I ever wanted to do was to join the police. Don't know why, just with no family history, no tradition.
You're a guard.
Yeah, that's all I ever wanted to do. And
you're the second guard I've interviewed this week, so I'm turning into a state informer.
But I actually remember an uncle of mine, he's dead since, but the day I passed out of Templemore, he pulled me aside and he jokingly said, "You're the only one ever to let this family down by joining this crowd." And, you know, I was so elated on the day, but it always stuck with me. He was saying in a joking fashion.
Yeah.
But the point was, you know, we had no family history, no tradition.
No.
In that background. Father worked in Guinness's, mother worked at home, and he was a senior trade union official, and would have had and has a big social conscience, and probably as I grew up, I can remember, the likes of Frank Klusky being in our house, or young Dennis Larkin, they were influenced by people.
Yeah.
And my mother was a completely different kettle of fish in that she would be non-political in that way, but I can remember people coming to our door and my mother would feed them. That there was one particular fellow who used to come to the door for years, and the mother would hand them out a tray, and that's just the way that the two of them are. And I suppose, we soak that stuff from our parents. As Heidi Schleifer says, the space between two parents.
Yeah.
There's the example. And so anyway, I always wanted to be in the police. I got 2 jobs in Guinness's and I didn't want them. My mother nearly went crazy at the time because couldn't understand why you wouldn't go into Guinness's. But I knew what I wanted, and thank God it worked out for me and I got in. And I spent 22 years in the police. Loved every minute of it. Had a great time. Really loved it. I never really did anything for more than 3 or 4 years. I'm constantly moving. But one day I was coming back from lunch in Camden Street, and I remember seeing somebody who was visibly distinct, different skin colour. This is over 20 years ago. I remember thinking, Ireland is changing. Because you didn't see that visible difference at that time. And a couple of weeks later then there was a new Masters in Philosophy programme in Trinity in Ethnic and Racial Studies, and I remember thinking I'd love to do it, and as it worked out, the police, released me to go down and do what I needed to do. And the research I did as part of that programme it was with Ronnie Glenton, who was the doctor at the time who was supervising the course, and she had created it and set it up, and it was a fantastic experience, and she was very encouraging. And the research I did was on policing and changing Ireland, and I went back to the police and I said, look, you better set up a unit, this is coming. Our changing Ireland is coming. And at that time, the Stephen Lawrence inquiry would have been very big in England. It was, it had happened around then, and there was a lot of talk around race relations, but Ireland was a completely different model in that we'd no colonising history. We hadn't gone away anywhere. We didn't expect people to arrive in the way that some of the colonised countries did. And this huge shock to our system, happened. I remember working in Harcourt Square in the mid to late 90s, and queues of people, asylum seekers going down. At that time they were all processed in Harcourt Square, and this was just unbelievable how this happened. The Berlin Wall had fallen, so people came from, Central Europe in ways that we'd never seen before. And the economy, of course, began to boom. So all of a sudden, the whole face of Irishness and what it meant to be Irish was changing. And I just happened to be there at that time, and I saw it. So I went back to the police and I said, you better set up a unit. So they said, okay, you do it. So I was instrumental in setting up the Garda Racial and Intercultural Unit, which is now called the Garda Diversity Office. And it really was kind of the first experiment, or the first foray into, understanding diversity or understanding differences. And after that, I took a career break and went into work in a legal practice for a little while in town, and at the same time had set up Open Minds, and it just grew from there. I've been in so many companies, and in that time since I eventually resigned. I went back to the police for a while, but I resigned then. And I've, thank God, I've been in India, I've been in Cairo, Istanbul, Cyprus, all over Europe, the States. I've been all over doing this kind of work, and I've been incredibly lucky that I built up this experience that I have built up. But I also believe that somewhere along the way, I'm on a journey. We're all on a journey, and the first 21 or 2 years in the police was meant to happen. I was meant to learn something. What I'm doing now, and I still sometimes can't see. You struggle to figure out what's this all about. What's
I know you got every day.
And but as I look back and as I try to take what I call a drone position and look down, it does begin to knit together.
As Steve Jobs said, you can only join the dots looking back.
Yeah, exactly. But I do. There's times when I say, I'm incredibly lucky, and I'm very grateful for. As I said, I've been in so many big companies, and I've had so many insights. That my head is definitely a walking encyclopedia of kind of how we human beings treat each other, and how we interact with each other, and really I suppose the thing to do is to get it down now on paper, or to get it recorded in exactly the way that you're doing, and to use it to influence people to say, look, there is another way. It isn't always about the task; it's about the people who perform the task.
Unbelievably, what would you say your why in life is?
Why? I wouldn't say. I'm not sure I have a why.
Yeah.
I have a what.
Okay, give me that.
I have a what in that I love Simon Sinek's TED Talk, where he talks about the idea of what and why. What I'm doing, I believe, contributes to something, to a bigger picture. I'm not sure what that bigger picture is. I wish, they talk about the idea of different dimensions of thinking. 100 years ago, we didn't realise there was magnetic fields. We didn't realise there was electrical fields. Now we know there are. And in that sense, I know we're all co-joined somehow. We're connected somehow.
Collective unconscious.
Yeah, and for me, it's somehow, I don't know how what I'm doing fits into the big picture, but I'm comfortable that there is a big picture, and I'm comfortable that every experience that I have in some way contributes to influencing people, that they will influence others in a more positive way. And that's, when you say to me, if something were to happen to me and I was to be gone tomorrow, I think one of the greatest satisfactions that I would take is that whole idea of the richness of the experience that I've had, that I've been lucky and privileged enough to, to be able to do what I wanted to do in the police, but at the same time, to experience, human beings and the way we deal with each other in so many different ways and on so many different levels, and I suppose to give that back. And that's one of the things I try to do in the work that I'm doing is to raise this awareness, or to, I call it diversity consciousness. To raise consciousness in people that, it is about people.
Absolutely.
Fundamentally, it's about people. It's about, how we connect with people, how we influence people, how we lead them, or how we help them to be the best version of them. And I often think there's one of the things, sometimes we judge people. I lecture in the business college in Germany, and I see a lot of students who come in for whatever reasons, inhibited about their own potentiality. That for various reasons in life, they believe that, I'm not as smart as other people, or and I happened to see a quote the other day that, kind of talked about there's always unopened potential in people. And our job is to help them to find that, help to go inside, as you said earlier on, and to figure out what and who they are, and what it is that they're here to do. So to go back to your question, I'm not sure there's a why. There definitely is a what. And for me, it's around the idea of learning from me, and then sharing that learning in a way that helps other people to grow and to reach their potentials. Now, having said that, I still need to reach mine too. I'm always conscious of that. You never stop growing. Learning is a lifelong thing.
Oh, I'm a student of life. What would you reckon then? What failures have been your greatest teacher, or perceived failures, or even stumbling blocks, even anything? What something that you've learned from?
I struggle with, when we talk about failures, because again, from an NLP perspective, we talk about the idea of that there's no failure, there's only feedback. And if you take the feedback that you got from something didn't work the way you wanted it to work yet, right? It does not mean that it won't work in the future. It just hasn't worked yet.
Okay.
So have I had lots of experiences of things that, I think it was the Queen said one time, with the benefit of historical hindsight, one wishes that things had been done differently. And I'm the same. There's decisions I made, there's things that I did that, I look back and say, what did I create that hassle for, or why did I do that, or didn't need to that. But then, again, I realize these are just thoughts.
And as you say the word failure, I touch down and I feel an iffy feeling in my belly. That's not nice. But when you said to me, an opportunity to learn, grow, improve, change what we do, I get a warm fuzzy feeling. So even the language we say to ourselves, that's a failure, or geez, you know what, this is an opportunity to learn, I could grow from this.
Yeah.
Whole different ballgame, isn't it?
Well, I this morning before we did this program, I was running the program. One of the exercises I often do with people is I get them to imagine that they're back at school, and I'd say to imagine you're late, and the teacher, is waiting for you in the corridor, and the teacher says, "Why are you late for school?" And I'd say, "No, go inside and tell me what happens as you reimagine that experience." And they'll come back and they'll say, "Oh, I feel tense and I feel stressed and I feel whatever." And I'll say, "So have I influenced your state?" And you go, "Yeah, in a negative way." Exactly like you said, I have this feeling, pit at the stomach feeling.
Yeah.
And so then, a couple of minutes later, I'll say to them, "Okay, back to school, same teacher, you come in and you're late." And they say, "What made you late for school today?" And I'd say, "Now, tell me what's happening." And, almost always people will say, "Oh yeah, it's a different, it's not the same, and I don't feel the same level of stress, and I don't feel," okay. So from a physiological point of view, they're not, heart rate hasn't gone up as much, blood pressure has not gone up as much, they're not panicking as much. And the difference simply is what and why. Why are you late makes people defensive. Why did you not do makes somebody defensive. What made you late, or what made you not able to do it? I need more training, or the bus broke down, or whatever. And what, so to go back to your point, people very often don't realize language is such a powerful motivator. If we learn to use language in a way that influences people into a more positive state. If we're saying to our children, "Why did you do this? Why did you do that?" They just get defensive and they push back.
Fuck.
But if we say to somebody, "What made you do that?"
Brilliant.
It just
even to ourselves.
Absolutely.
Even to ourselves. Like, even start with yourself.
It completely changes the inner experience. That, why you're probably going to get into this limbic brain.
What could I have done better? What could I have done to change that situation?
What could I still do?
And it's a positive inquiry.
Yeah. And again, it's not personal. You're not taking it personally.
Yeah.
And it's also, that I love that idea in coaching that, there is never one possibility. There's a range of possibilities. Your job is to help people to come up with this range of possibilities or options, and then to pick the one that works best right now. It doesn't mean that it's permanently going to stay that way. It might change again.
Yeah.
But at least by asking what, we're getting to this range of possibilities, and that's what it's about. So when you said to me about failure, look, I'm human. Of course, I've had failures, but I tend, and I don't know where I got this from, but I tend to try and look and say, okay, what am I learning from this? How do I take it into the future? How do I, I had a really powerful experience with, we had a couple of foster kids in our house, and without going into details, we had an experience one time where we thought one of them had done something negative, and I had kind of judged this, child, and I was angry and hurt and frustrated, and it was only at the time, a professional rang me who was dealing with the young lad, and he said, okay, it's perfectly normal to feel the way you're feeling if you think that somebody did what you think this little fella did in your home, it was about something that had gone missing. And but then she said, can I give you another alternative? And she said, sometimes when foster children are getting moved around, it's a very difficult time for them. Emotionally, it can be a difficult time. And sometimes they'll do an act to break the relationship. I remember in that moment when she said it to me, wow, how did I miss this? That it was an unconscious thing. He didn't realise what he was doing, but he was doing it to make it easier for us to let him go, because he was going at the time, and probably for him to go. And it just completely changed, that behind every action there's a positive intent. And if you're prepared to look for the positive intent, it'll change the way you see and understand why people do what they do. And I often use that story today, with people that I'm working with, to say, look, try and look for the positive intent. Try and look for your own positive intent, because it's there too. And if you can see things from that new paradigm, it'll change the way you feel inside. And if it changes, then it gives you more flexibility. I think it's Tony Robbins who said, the person with the greatest flexibility is the one who'll be most successful.
Oh, yeah.
And really, what is thinking all about, but identifying.
It's flexibility, and then it's also adaptation, because adaptation, if you can adjust to a situation, if you can be flexible in your cognition as well,
Yeah.
That's the survival.
Yeah. But I absolutely, go back to your point earlier on, I firmly believe it's an inside job.
Oh.
It definitely is a personal inside job, and it begins inside us and how we were programmed, to where we're at today. And how we got to where. And organizations are no different. We program our people.
We touch on it a few minutes ago there at an unconscious level. Can we just touch on unconscious bias? It's something that I absolutely love. Came into my radar a couple of years ago, and I was like, did you give me this quote? Actually, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
I've plagiarised that the fuck. I say it everywhere.
Okay.
I didn't know that. Unconscious bias, I love it. You touch on that?
It's as human beings, over 90% of what we do on a day-to-day basis is unconscious behaviour. It's the only way we can make sense of the world. We'd crack up if we were trying and take everything on board. So what we do is we delete, we distort, and we generalise. We delete a huge amount of information. We distort experiences and we generalise experiences. And I had a experience with a woman in a shop not so long ago where I went to pay with my bank card, and for some reason the bank card wouldn't work, and this lady wasn't Irish, I could see from her badge, and she gave it back to me, and I cleaned it and I gave it back to her again, and at this stage there's a queue behind me, so you can imagine I'm stressed, and so I give it back to her and it won't go through a second time, right? And she gives it back to me, and when I thought about it, if I said to you, if you were on that cash register, Matt, if you were the person who was serving me and the card wouldn't work, most Irish people will probably say, they'll make a joke, they'll make light of it. Probably, a lot of them would say, oh, it's the machine. Machines aren't doing it, right? And I say, where do we get that from?
Yeah.
Where does that come from? And But it's an Irish thing.
Yeah.
It's something we share. It's one of these values.
Stereotypical.
Absolutely, but it creates comfort for us. So I do jokingly say to people, so
Social intelligence.
yeah, but we'd be dishonest in order to save face. That's the reality. It's a white lie, you'll still get to heaven, but it's still a white lie. Right? And but it's something we share, as part of this cultural programming. And anyway, I gave the card back to the lady for the third time, and I said to her, "Wonder what's wrong with it?" And she looked at me and she said, "Maybe you've no money in your account." I remember, just
straight.
Absolutely,
straight as a die.
Now, if I didn't do the work that I know, I'd have stepped back and said, I would have had so many expletives to describe that experience. The space would have been toxic, right? But I was able to step back because I do what I do and say, no, she's telling the truth. For her, the truth is important.
Blunt, honest.
Yeah, you should tell the truth. For us, it's, we'll bend things, to make you feel safe. Neither one is right, neither one is wrong. It just is.
Just is.
And it's the willingness to kind of, you were talking about unconscious bias. We're doing stuff every minute of every day that we do at an unconscious level. She didn't set out to upset me. She was being completely honest. She was just saying what she was thinking. Okay. I obviously have a background in the police, and I know damn well the amount of times that, your own personal prejudices can bubble up there. You need to be really, really aware of them. And there's a great tool that, this idea of stopping to watch what's coming into your head, watch the words that come into your head, watch the things that come into your head when you think of certain, to watch it and then to think about it. Where did I get that from? Is that what my parents would have put in there? Is that a value that might, to treat somebody less favourably is okay? Is that something that my parents would have put in there?
It's you pick it up. I'm a firm believer in nature or nurture rather than nature.
Yeah.
I think we pick up a lot from our environment. And I'd say that for myself because I come from a working class area, we live in the flats, and I would have been very tribal a long time ago. It's us against the world. I would have never been.
But it kept you safe, man.
Kept me safe.
That's the whole, yeah.
Even when I came to this organisation, to the NRH, I do everything myself. I do it myself. I'm not a team player. I'll do it. I was letting on I was, but really I wasn't.
Right.
I was like batting down the hatches. I'll do this myself.
Right.
So my bias was huge, and I had to really take a look at, as you said, my thoughts, my actions. What's going on here? This is not beneficial to my team.
But I think it's really important too that unconscious bias is a buzzword now, and everybody's talking about unconscious bias, but I think it's important that we don't make people feel bad.
No, it is. As you said, it is.
It is what it is. That if you go back to that idea of positive intent, people are doing what they're doing for a reason. What that reason is, if we take the time to explore and figure out why or how did they come to that frame of mind or that thinking. But I'm not for 1 minute saying that there aren't people out there, who are absolutely biased. There are, but I think it's really important that organisations don't frame, the whole conversation around diversity, that it's just about unconscious bias, that people feel guilty, for being programmed in a certain way. Of course, it's something we absolutely need to be aware of. It needs to be flagged. We need to be dealing with it. But I believe we need to give people the tools to deal with it personally. Rather than say to them, you're wrong or this thinking is wrong, say, what caused it to happen? What made you think that way? And what can you do about it? So this idea of, watching, thinking, acting, doing something different. That, again, in my trainings, I often say to people that the habits that we run on a daily basis, they're because of neural pathways that we've built over years. We've learned how to write, how to walk, how to ride a bike. We do this stuff without even thinking. And we've learned some of this negative stuff about other people. In the same way. Can we learn new habits?
100%. Neuroplasticity.
Absolutely. And this, you look at the work you do in the NRH, it's all about helping people to develop.
Yeah.
People who...
New pathways.
Absolutely, to create new ways of doing things.
Yeah, 100%.
So, I often say to people, could I learn to write with my weaker hand? Yeah. If I had the motivation to do it, if I wanted to be, and the motivation should be, I'm reaching full potential, I'm a better human being, and, each of us should have this what or why. You should go, why would I do that? Because it creates a better space for somebody else. But we all have the potential to create these new habits. And if we're prepared to challenge ourselves and say, okay, so yeah, I did think that way. Like me, with the foster child, how did I jump to that conclusion? And then when somebody gave me new information, it completely changed my thought process, and I went, wow, I was so wrong. No, I wasn't wrong in that, that's my reality at that moment. But when somebody
You're wrong, but right.
Well, when somebody gave me the flexibility or the potential to see a new way of looking at this same issue, it completely changed my perspective. And that's for me what it's all about. This idea of saying to people, yes, bias will always be there. Bias can be positive or negative. It will always be there. It's how we manage it, and how as organisations, and we say to people, this stuff will happen, but how do we become more conscious of it, and how do we, provide people then with tools to do something about it?
Yeah, and it's back to what we said earlier. It's not identifying with your thoughts. People feel guilty about having these biased thoughts, unconscious biased thoughts. They think, oh, that's me, that's my identity. When really they're just fucking thoughts. They come, they go.
Absolutely.
And you can control what you decide to. If you had a negative thought about a person or a negative minority, whatever, you can choose not to act on it or think that way. You can change that.
The key to it is, I always say to people, it's one thing to have thoughts, it's another thing to act on them. And as an ex-police person, I know that better than probably most people, that what's in your head needs to stay in your head. If it's a negative thing, that to allow that out, in such a way that it becomes a discrimination, or that somebody is treated less fairly than somebody else, is completely wrong. But as I said, I do believe in this new paradigm, and this, when we're talking about diversity in a new way, I do believe that it's crucial that people focus, that in diversity programs, people are learning about how can I think more effectively, how can I do this more effectively, rather than have them apprehensive, coming thinking that it's, about how not to be in trouble, how, not to think in a negative way, or to feel that, because might have thoughts in your head or biases in your head that you're wrong. We're not wrong. It's recognizing it is the first one, watching it. And then saying, okay, so when you have this cognitive dissonance, the values that your parents put in. I told my mother, feeding the homeless man on our wall. She never taught me to treat somebody in a less favourable way. Right, so the value that came from her was, every human being has value.
Right.
Right, and then so if I'm saying, if I have this bias that's saying no, that person has less value, there's a clash, there's a dissonance between my mother's value, Molly's value, and this one. Which one should win? This one. Molly's one, of course. So it's it's saying to people, become more aware of what you're thinking and how you got to think that in the first place. And I think the other thing too is, and it's something that organisations and we as a society could do, a lot more about, is to create the possibility of interaction in the space. Because the more we interact with people from, backgrounds that we're apprehensive about, the less we worry. The more I get to know Matt, the less I worry about Matt, if that makes sense. Because I learn to know you at a deeper level. I learn to, I often say to people, think about the people you love the most in the world. Right? What brought you together? Is it looks and skin colour and maybe that's what brought you across the disco floor in the first place. Maybe that's what made you walk into the nursery and go, oh God, isn't she beautiful? Or he, the baby. But what holds you together? I had a wit one day. I said to him, what holds you together in those relationships? And he said, jokingly said, my mortgage, right? But everybody laughed. But it's not. It's that deeper level stuff. It's how we share values. It's how we see the world. It's how we understand each other. That's the stuff that holds us together. Just the inclusive bit. And the workplace is no different. At that deeper level, what holds us together? What is it that we have in common? And I think if we spent more time exploring what we have in common, what we share in common, we would probably create, more functioning organisations and societies.
In society at large. Where do you think Ireland is when it comes to diversity and inclusion at the moment in 2019?
I think...
Are we anywhere near where we should,
I honestly believe it's like everything you and I are talking about, it's a never-ending journey. I don't believe there's a definitive, there's a time when we'll say, we've hit it, we're there. We probably never will and never should be there. We should be constantly reimagining. I do know that, when I thought about diversity 20, 25 years ago in the police, I remember somebody saying to me one day, you're 20 years ahead of your time. And I was, and definitely I was, but I've learned so much in that time that, Now it's a buzzword. Everybody's talking about it. But my fear now is that people are talking about it as if it's all about equality and 9 grounds
And just at an intellectual level.
you know, that it's about compliance and it's about, you know, it's much more than that.
I see that.
I do believe we have a huge opportunity in this country, and I've said this for years, and I believe the opportunity is this. We don't have the historical background that a lot of Europe has. We never colonized, we never went anywhere. So we didn't have expectations that people were going to come. And in that sense, I do believe we could create something that's new. You know, we could create something that the rest of Europe would look and say, geez, look what the Irish are doing. Look how they've reimagined, you know, their country, or look how they've reimagined, you know, Irishness, or look how they've reimagined, you know, what, you know, a diverse society is, or an inclusive society is. You know, so are we at the end of a journey? No. Will we ever be at the end of a journey? No, I don't believe it. I do believe that, you know, there's, without doubt, there's richness and diversity, but there's also a certain amount of trepidation and fear. You know, that there are people, you know, who look and say, what's happening to my culture, if you know, or what's happening to where I grew up? And there's a certain amount of fear. So it's really, really important that we manage this. You know, that we don't assume that natural harmony is going to result. It doesn't. You know, and it never will. So long as there are human beings involved, you know, you cannot assume that just putting them together is going to result in natural harmony. And it won't. And I do think that, you know, at a societal level, at a governmental level, at a strategic level, there is a lot more we could be doing. I do believe that, you know, in organisations there are people who are really, really genuine and, you know, really, you know, doing everything they can to make, you know, to create more inclusive workplaces. But I think at a societal level, we could definitely be doing a lot more. And, you know, I'm thinking about schools, you know, service provision, you know, where 20 years ago, you know, staff bases were probably fairly homogeneous. Classes were fairly, when you and I went to school, chances that there was somebody from a different country in the class were probably fairly remote.
None.
You know, today that's not the case. But how have we managed that process? How have we managed the process of, you know, teachers teaching in a culturally diverse environment? How have we managed the process of, you know, integrating people from different backgrounds into the police here or into society here? And that, I think, is something that, you know, we should put a lot more attention to. But having said that, as I said, I do believe that we could create a model that, you know, if we were proactive, that the rest of Europe would look and say, look what they've done. I believe that, you know, I honestly believe that we could still do that. I hope that's the way it goes, you know, but I do believe it.
I'm very mindful of the time. We better wrap up. What's the one thing you would like people to take away after listening to this interview?
I would love to think that if people took away from me what it is that I'm saying that I have discovered along my journey, that idea of thinking about thinking. I'm not saying I have it perfected. I don't. You know, there are days when I still get angry. I still get, you know, of course we do. You know, I have a temper the same as everybody else. But it's learning to think about how I got there is what's really important to me. If people were to take away the idea of, you know, using tools like neuro-linguistic programming, you know, the principles, the 3 principles, you know, any of those tools that help people to kind of begin inside, to begin this journey inside, and to say, how did I get to where I am? You know, and how does my state or my internal state, how does that impact or influence the people around me? And can I change that state? Can I control, you know, and, you know, it's Viktor Frankl's message to us that, yeah, we can. It's Heidi Fleischer's message that, you know, if you can think about the space, can you reimagine the space? And if we take all of these, you know, these learnings, these tools, and we say, okay, Stephen Covey talked about the idea of deposits in the emotional bank account. You know, how do we do little things that, you know, might make a little or a big difference to you, but how do I do things on a day-to-day basis that make you feel, but you know, you described a while ago about the feeling. You know, how can I say something or do something that makes you feel better? You know, and it's not, I always say to people, it doesn't cost anything.
No.
You know, but it is learning to listen maybe in a different way, learning to give feedback in a different way, maybe, you know, learning to empathize in a different way. So what I really would love to think is that people, if they got nothing from listening to me except to realize that, you know, there are a whole raft of tools out there, and, you know, to begin their own journey to go looking at some of this stuff and say, how can I apply this? And not, just necessarily in work, but at home, with our kids, with our families, because that's where it begins. So to reimagine the space is really what I would say to people, and begin with yourself.
Absolutely fantastic. Where can people find you? If you want to get in contact, do you want to enroll in your awesomeness?
Diversity.ie is probably the best way to get me.
Right. You're a hard man to get, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, the other thing is, man, you have my mobile number, so if somebody who is listening and really wants it, you can give my mobile.
I absolutely love it. I love the work you do. Did you know what it is about you? It's all from the heart. It's genuine. It's heartfelt. It's people are at the forefront of your work, and that oozes out of you. You can't fake that shit.
I love it. And I have to say, I absolutely love doing the work that I do, and I'm privileged. You were saying to me earlier about the what and the why. That I'm able to do what I'm able to do for
the why is you love it.
Privilege. I love it.
You love working with people. You love helping. You're a change manager. You're a leader in your field, and you use diversity. Dave, thanks very much.
You're most welcome, sir.
Absolutely.